I never imagined I'd end up in a maximum security prison, let alone sharing a corridor with someone as famous as Diddy. Yet here I was, newly arrived, my orange jumpsuit feeling stiff against my skin. The corridor was long and dimly lit, each cell door thick with reinforced steel. I'd been assigned a cell just 3 doors down from his. That's right, Diddy, the music mogul, now just another inmate. Except he wasn't just another inmate. Everyone knew him, and that knowledge carried weight, danger, and a strange hush. The guard who escorted me offered no small talk. He led me past silent figures behind bars, each set of eyes assessing me. When I reached my cell, the guard unlocked it, shoved me in, then locked it behind me. I looked down the corridor, glimpsing Diddy's cell front. Hard to believe the man who once hosted lavish white parties and mingled with celebrities now lived in a concrete box. No more designer suits, no more adoring crowds. At first, I thought having a famous neighbor might offer some kind of protection. But I learned fast that fame breeds complications. In prison, respect and fear rule. Diddy was rumored to have alliances with certain inmates, buying favors with whatever resources he could muster from the outside world. That created enemies too, men who resented his special treatment, the guards who seemed more lenient toward him. Rumor had it that late at night, he and a guard or two exchanged envelopes or whispered deals. Others watched with hungry eyes, plotting who knows what. My first night was restless. The corridor was oddly quiet. Unlike some prisons where you hear shouts, laughter, or arguments, this place was subdued. I tried to sleep, but my mind spun with questions. Would Diddy's influence protect me, or mark me as a potential snitch if I got too curious? Would someone try to use me to get to him? A few days passed without incident. I kept my head down, following the unspoken rules. Don't stare, don't ask questions, don't comment on what you see. I observed that some nights, the guards lingered near Diddy's cell, talking softly. Once, I saw a guard slip a packet through the bars. The next morning, the guard acted as if nothing happened. Then, one afternoon in the recreation area, an indoor gym with worn mats and a single TV, tensions flared. 2 inmates argued over a spot on the bench. One made a comment about Diddy's chosen few, implying the other inmate had an advantage due to Diddy's pull. They squared off, fists clenched, until a guard barked at them to knock it off. I stood at the edge, pretending not to hear. Mention of Diddy's name in a dispute meant trouble. If these men saw me react, they might think I was involved somehow. Later that evening, after lockdown, I lay on my bunk, trying to read a battered magazine I found on a previous occupant's shelf. Then I heard muted footsteps in the corridor. This was unusual. Guards rarely patrolled at that hour. I moved to the cell door and peered through the narrow slot. 2 silhouettes hovered near Diddy's cell. One was definitely a guard, the uniform gave him away. The other wore no uniform, just dark clothing. Not a prisoner jumpsuit either. My heart thumped. A visitor at this hour? Impossible. Contraband drop-off? Or something more sinister? I strained my ears. Couldn't catch exact words, but their tones were urgent, tense. Diddy remained silent. At least I heard no voice from his cell. After a moment, the dark-clothed figure passed something to the guard, who slipped it inside Diddy's cell through the feeding slot. Then both moved away, leaving me shaken. What was just traded under cover of darkness? In the days that followed, a sense of unease spread through the corridor. Some inmates eyed Diddy's cell with a mix of envy and hatred. I overheard whispered threats. He can't buy his way out forever. Others seemed determined to get on his good side, hoping for scraps of favor. I kept my head down, praying no one asked my opinion. One night, a scream jarred me awake. It came from a few cells down, near where Diddy's cell was located. I rushed to the door slot again, only to see guards rushing in with flashlights. They ordered all inmates to face their cell's rear wall. Heart pounding, I complied. As I stood facing the cracked paint, I wondered if this was some sort of retaliatory attack on someone close to Diddy, or an attempt to send him a message. The lockdown after the scream lasted longer than usual. When it ended, rumors spread. An inmate who supposedly tried to extort Diddy ended up stabbed. The guards found him bleeding. Would this trigger a full-blown war in the corridor? Everyone tensed up, wary of alliances, fearful that even a glance could imply taking sides. Diddy remained quiet and enigmatic. I never heard his voice raised, never saw him openly gloat or threaten. That silence was unsettling. A powerful man not needing to show force, because his influence was a silent current running through the prison halls. Guards seemed nervous around his cell. Did they fear outside connections that could cost them their jobs or lives outside these walls? I avoided direct eye contact with Diddy's cell whenever I passed, even when heading to showers or the infirmary. Sometimes I thought I felt his gaze, cool and assessing, weighing whether I posed a problem or a resource. I hoped I was just invisible, a neutral bystander, no threat. Then came a day when a rumor spread that a big shakeup was coming, transfers, increased security measures due to contraband found. The tension rose again. At lunch, seated at a metal table under guard supervision, I heard an inmate say quietly, "Diddy's pushing too far, bringing stuff in. Someone's going to teach him a lesson." My stomach twisted. Violence loomed. That afternoon, we returned to our cells. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation. I half expected a brawl or shouts, but the corridor stayed eerily silent. Hours passed. After lights out, I lay awake, ears tuned to the faintest sound. Footsteps again. Slow, deliberate. I peered through the door slot. A single figure approached Diddy's cell. Not a guard this time, an inmate with something wrapped around his hand. My heart hammered. I thought about calling out, but fear clamped my throat shut. Interfere and I'd be marked. Stay silent and watch violence unfold? The figure tried Diddy's cell door slot. Another presence emerged, a guard down the hall. The figure froze. In a flash, the guard shone a flashlight. The figure darted away, disappearing into the shadows. The guard didn't pursue. Instead, he lowered the flashlight slowly and walked on as if nothing happened. Collusion, indifference, couldn't tell. But I saw the balance of power. Attempts were made on Diddy's domain, and the system did nothing overt. Over the next weeks, no major event occurred that the guards acknowledged. But everyone knew the corridor was a powder keg. Diddy's presence created silent pressures, favors traded in whispers, enemies waiting for a slip. The horror wasn't in daily screams or riots, but in the oppressive silence, the knowledge that power and fear danced together in the dark. Unspoken alliances controlling who lived quietly and who ended up a lesson for others. I did my best to remain invisible. Eventually, I served my time and was released. Stepping into the daylight as a free man, I felt relief wash over me, but memories lingered. Even now, I recall the quiet tension of that corridor. Diddy's cell a silent nexus of influence. No screams needed, no open displays of brutality. Just a suffocating hush, a feeling that behind those thick doors and guarded stairs lay endless secrets. The prison might not host lavish parties or VIP rooms, but the same quiet intimidation and fear that haunted his legendary white parties were now distilled into a single corridor of concrete and steel. I never spoke of it publicly. Who would believe me? But I share it now as a warning. Power adapts. Whether at a glamorous event or inside a prison corridor, those who hold power find ways to maintain control, leaving the rest of us trapped in silence and dread. In that corridor, I learned that true horror doesn't always need screams. It can thrive in quiet stairs, locked doors, and fear too deep to voice. I was transferred to this high-security prison only a week ago, still adjusting to the routines, the whispered power struggles, and the watchful stares. The corridors were painted a dull off-white, and the smell of disinfectant and sweat clung to everything. I was nobody here, just another inmate trying to keep my head down. No friends, no alliances yet, just survival. Rumor had it that Diddy, the once celebrated music mogul, was also locked up somewhere in this facility. People spoke of him in hushed tones. He'd arrived a few months prior, and from what I'd heard, his fame didn't translate into comfort here. Instead, it brought complexity. Some inmates revered him, others saw him as a mark, an opportunity, or an enemy. Guards talked less when passing his cell. Something was always simmering beneath the surface. I'd never caught a direct glimpse of Diddy until the day of the big yard transfer. The warden had decided to shake up inmate assignments, mixing different cell blocks in the yard at staggered times, claiming it was a measure to prevent the formation of dangerous cliques. Everyone knew it could spark chaos. The morning of the transfer, I woke early. My cellmate, a quiet older man, just shook his head as if anticipating trouble. After breakfast, guards barked orders. Some of us would move to a different area of the yard. We lined up in the main corridor, shuffling forward under watchful eyes and rifles slung at guard stations. As we stepped into the fenced yard, the sun stabbed my eyes. It was a large concrete rectangle with a few metal benches bolted down. No greenery, just layers of chain-link fence and razor wire. Today, I noticed a different crowd milling on the opposite end. Guys from another block, some known troublemakers. And among them, finally, I spotted Diddy. He stood near a corner, wearing the same jumpsuit as the rest of us, but still carrying himself with a certain calm. He kept close to a guard who lingered nearby, as if offering silent protection. Other inmates shot glances his way, some curious, some hostile. I tried not to stare. The best strategy was to pick a neutral spot by the fence and observe. The air felt tense. This was no ordinary yard time. It felt more like a stage test. I overheard snatches of conversation. They're putting us together to see who cracks first, and watch your back today. Halfway through the yard session, a group of 3 inmates approached Diddy. Not aggressively at first, just stepping into his personal space. I could see the unease ripple through the crowd. Would the guards intervene early? Probably not. The guards often let tensions rise to identify troublemakers. It's a cruel tactic they use, observing who challenges whom. Diddy raised his chin, acknowledging the trio without flinching. One of them, a tall man with tattoos creeping up his neck, murmured something I couldn't hear. Diddy shook his head, voice too low to carry, but his body language said, "No deal." The tattooed guy frowned, stepping even closer. The guard who hovered near Diddy took a step back, feigning disinterest. Suddenly, Diddy seemed alone, no one to shield him. I watched from afar, heart pounding. I had nothing to do with this, but if violence erupted, it might spill over. The yard was a closed arena. The other inmates moved subtly, positioning themselves as spectators or potential participants. The trio pressed in on Diddy. Everyone pretended not to look too obviously, but we all felt the tension spike. He remained calm, arms at his sides. Then the tattooed guy poked a finger into Diddy's chest. A guard barked, "Hey," but did nothing more. Diddy's gaze hardened. He said something too quiet for me to catch, but it made the tattooed guy glance around nervously. Whatever Diddy said, it hit a nerve. The tattooed guy paused, seemingly unsure. Perhaps Diddy reminded him that outside connections still existed, that harming him might bring consequences from beyond these walls. The silence that followed was loaded. The yard felt like a coiled spring, each of us holding our breath. Then, a sudden diversion. On the opposite end of the yard, a scuffle broke out between 2 inmates, unrelated to Diddy's standoff, but it drew the guards' attention. The guards rushed over there, yelling and swinging batons to break it up. The trio by Diddy seized the moment. With guards distracted, they lunged at him, trying to corner him against the fence. I saw Diddy's body tense, readying to defend himself, but they had numbers. A gasp rippled through the crowd. I knew I should stay out of it. Getting involved could mark me forever. But something about the scene, the famed mogul now vulnerable, the predators exploiting distraction, stirred a complex sympathy. I was no hero, but maybe I could shift attention. I grabbed a loose pebble and chucked it toward another part of the fence, making a tiny noise. A cheap trick, but one inmate turned his head, momentarily off balance. In that split second, Diddy struck. He shoved one attacker aside, slipping out of their encirclement. The tattooed guy cursed. Diddy moved with surprising agility, darting behind another inmate who shouted in protest. The yard's tension skyrocketed. Confusion reigned for a moment. I blended into the crowd, hoping no one noticed my petty attempt to distract. The guards, finishing their intervention on the other fight, now realized something was brewing near Diddy. They rushed over, shouting commands. The trio backed off, hands raised, pretending innocence. Diddy stood alone, breathing heavily but composed. One guard barked, "Everyone line up against the fence." We complied, forming a shaky line. The trio eyed Diddy, eyes full of unspoken threats. The guards scanned faces, trying to identify troublemakers. I kept my head down. The tattooed guy said nothing, smirking as if confident no proof existed. Another guard approached Diddy, maybe to ask what happened, but Diddy shook his head lightly, refusing to snitch. That silence told me all I needed to know. In here, even a man of his former status dared not break the code of silence. If he did, retribution would follow. We stood like that for what felt like ages, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the concrete yard. Finally, the guards ordered us back inside. No one was singled out this time, just a warning, a test of nerves. We filed through the door, tension unresolved. Back in the corridor, whispers flew. "Diddy nearly got jumped," said one inmate near me. Another shrugged. "He's just another fish in here." Fame don't count for much, but I sensed everyone knew fame counts in different ways. It attracts interest, envy, power plays. The staff and certain inmates might have their reasons to keep him alive or to leverage him. Danger hovered, subtle and constant. In the following days, the atmosphere remained charged. Rumors said Diddy's outside connections applied pressure, ensuring extra guard patrols near his cell. Others said he paid off a mediator inmate to broker peace. I saw no direct proof, but noticed fewer hostile glances aimed his way. The trio stayed low-key, probably waiting for another opportunity. I tried to remain a ghost, staying away from corners where deals were struck, ignoring any hint of conspiracy. Still, occasionally, I caught Diddy's eye in the corridor, a brief acknowledgement that I existed, a neutral presence. I wondered if he guessed I helped distract that attacker. Maybe he knew, maybe not. In prison, gratitude is as dangerous as hostility. Better not to stand out. The horror here wasn't about overt gore or screams. It was the quiet intensity, the knowledge that violence could erupt any time, that Diddy's past and influence made him a target or a pawn. The yard scenario revealed how easily one could get caught in someone else's war. Even a small action like tossing a pebble made my heart race with fear of discovery. Every day, subtle tensions threatened to boil over, and you never knew who watched from the shadows. In time, I completed my sentence and left that place behind. Walking free under open skies, I remembered that yard. The hush before the attempted attack, the guards choosing when to act, the inmates sizing each other up. Diddy survived that day, and likely survived many such tests. I survived by staying low, learning that in a world where power and resentment collide, silence and careful moves keep you alive. Now, outside, when I hear Diddy's music on the radio, my mind drifts back to that yard. Concrete, chain-link fences, and men in white jumpsuits waiting for a slip. Fame once surrounded him with fans and cameras. In prison, it drew predators and silent deals. The memory haunts me as a reminder that danger hides behind ordinary moments, and that sometimes, just one small distraction can shape a man's fate. I'd been in the isolation block for about 3 weeks when Diddy arrived. At least, that's who everyone said it was. This was no ordinary cell block. It was a high-security isolation wing deep in the prison's guts, where sound seemed to die in the thick concrete walls. The guards barely spoke. When they did, it was in terse commands or muttered threats. We inmates were kept in small, separate cells, allowed out only for a short shower or a brief walk in a tiny enclosed yard once every few days. I ended up here after a guard claimed I'd been uncooperative during a routine search. In reality, I just questioned why they were trashing my cell. Wrong move. Now I was stuck in near silence, no TV, no library access, nothing. Just my thoughts and the distant hum of the prison's mechanical systems. Then Diddy came. I didn't see him at first, I only knew from whispers that filtered through the ventilation system. Rumor travels even here, in the hush of isolation. Another inmate down the hall tapped a code on the wall, sharing what he'd overheard. Diddy's in cell 8. Cell 8 was just a few doors down from mine. A big name in a small space. For a moment, I wondered if that would change anything. Maybe the guards would be more cautious, or the tension might break. But the quiet dread persisted. In the isolation wing, no one shows their face freely. The guards escort you with hoods or handcuffs, ensuring you rarely catch more than a glimpse of your neighbors. Still, I could sense the atmosphere shift after Diddy's arrival. The guards' footsteps became more frequent at night. Sometimes I heard muffled conversations near cell 8, low and urgent tones. One evening, I caught a guard grumbling. "He's not breaking. We need a different approach." Breaking? Were they trying to coerce Diddy into something? Maybe spill secrets or sign a deal? Without human contact, paranoia grows. My mind spun with theories. Maybe the prison administration wanted leverage over him. Maybe other inmates wanted to harm him or trade information for favors. The silence weighed on me. I tried not to care. Celebrity or not, we were all trapped. But the tension was impossible to ignore. One day, during my brief yard time, which was just a concrete pen with a mesh roof, I heard raised voices from somewhere beyond the walls. Guards yelling commands and a single sharp cry. I couldn't tell who it belonged to. Back in my cell, I waited anxiously. Later, a guard dropped my meal tray with unusual force, scowling as if I'd done something wrong. They were all on edge. Maybe Diddy resisted their attempts. Maybe they tried and failed to extract something from him. Then came the night I heard a strange scraping sound in the corridor. I pressed my ear against the thick door, straining to decipher it. Footsteps shuffled past my cell. Someone hissed, "Keep it down." Another voice, quieter, "We must handle it now before morning." Fear prickled my skin. Handle what? I suspected they targeted Diddy. Maybe they intended to teach him a lesson or ensure his silence. Time dragged. I dozed off, only to wake to a faint metallic clang. I peered through the narrow cell door slot, seeing only the dimly lit corridor. A shadow moved, too large to be a single guard. Two figures, maybe dragging something. My breath caught. Could they be moving someone unconscious? The question pounded in my mind, but I dared not call out. In isolation, calling out for help only marks you as a troublemaker. At breakfast, a paper bag shoved through my slot. I noticed the guards were unusually silent. No small talk, no insults, just grim faces passing by. I tried to catch a glimpse toward cell 8, but saw nothing. The door was closed as always. I wondered if Diddy was still inside, alive and well, or if something terrible had happened overnight. No screams, no alarms, just that unsettling silence. Days passed without answers. The whisper network dried up. It felt like everyone was too scared to tap on walls or share coded messages. The guards might be cracking down. Once, I risked a knock on the wall to my neighbor. No response. Maybe he was gone, or too frightened to acknowledge me. Then, unexpectedly, an opportunity came. During shower time, just a single stall separated by partial screens, I caught sight of a guard guiding another inmate back toward the cells. As they passed, I recognized the inmate's stance. Tense shoulders, careful steps. It was Diddy. He was alive. He moved slowly, as if sore or injured, but upright. The guard barked at me to keep my eyes forward. I obeyed, relieved to confirm he existed. But Diddy's presence didn't mean safety. If anything, it confirmed he'd survived a confrontation, which meant the tension might escalate further. Rumor had it the prison administration was unhappy with him, that he refused to cooperate with some undisclosed demands. The guards and certain inmates, possibly colluding, might attempt another ploy. I sensed a showdown brewing, something that would test everyone's silence and obedience. A few nights later, I awoke to a faint clicking noise, like someone picking a lock. Heart pounding, I listened carefully. It came from the direction of cell 8 or nearby. I imagined a scenario: a hired inmate or corrupt staff member trying to break into Diddy's cell, catch him off guard. If Diddy resisted before, maybe this time they'd finish the job quietly. My mind raced. Should I shout? Alert the guards? But what if the guards were involved? I remained silent, praying nothing spilled into my cell. The clicking stopped, followed by a grunt and a muffled curse. Footsteps receded. Another near incident thwarted or delayed. A chilling pattern emerged. Attempts made in darkness, never confirmed, always denied by morning. In the following day's meager yard time, I tried to read body language. Guards looked tired, stressed. No one spoke. A fellow inmate, eyes hollow, mouthed a single word at me. Danger, that was all. He turned away immediately, terrified of being seen communicating. Danger, I already knew, but this confirmation struck me hard. I realized that whatever power Diddy once wielded outside, and here it was a double-edged sword. His name drew malicious attention. If he didn't yield to whatever demands or extortions were at play, they might try more drastic measures. And we, the bystanders, trapped in the same corridor, risked becoming collateral damage. A fight or a staged riot could erupt, and guards might punish everyone. Innocence offered no protection. The final straw came one afternoon when, during a routine cell check, a guard searched my cell more thoroughly than usual. He found nothing, I had nothing to hide. But as he left, he whispered, "Keep your eyes down. Don't get involved." It was a warning, not a courtesy. I nodded, numb with fear. Later that night, I heard a distant commotion. Faint, as if from another corridor. I braced myself for more silent horrors. But the night passed quietly. In the morning, at chow delivery, I noticed a subtle change. Diddy's cell door now had 2 guards stationed by it. The staff seemed to have escalated protection or containment efforts. No one explained why. In time, tension simmered down just enough for routine to settle back in. No major incidents. Perhaps a deal was struck or a new balance of power established. I never learned the details. The isolation block never offered clear narratives. Only fragments of dread and the sense that invisible negotiations shaped our fate. Months later, I was reassigned to a different block. On my last day in isolation, I caught a glimpse of Diddy again, escorted by 2 guards, head held high but eyes guarded. He survived, but at what cost? I didn't know and wouldn't ask. Leaving that corridor behind, I carried the memory of stifled screams, secret attempts at forced entry, and hushed threats. The horror didn't rely on open brutality. It thrived in subtle movements at night, whispered alliances, and the oppressive silence that forbade questions. I share this story now to remind others that power, fame, and influence can become fuel for tension rather than safety in a place stripped of all pretenses. In that isolation block, Diddy's presence and whatever he symbolized created a silent battlefield, where I learned the cruel truth. In prison's darkness, even a name known worldwide can't guarantee peace, only provoke new shadows in the half-lit halls. I left grateful to be away from that world, but the memory lingers of that corridor, where whispered threats and attempted intrusions defined our nights. The silence still haunts me, a testament to how human fear and ambition twist reality into a quiet, relentless nightmare.